Somebody stole my calendar. Has that ever happened to you? When somebody completely takes your calendar away from you, you aren't able to determine one day from another day. Can you imagine how your life would be affected if you no longer had any record of important anniversaries, seasons, and holidays? In fact, you would not be able to participate in any special occasion simply because you would not know when it was taking place. If somebody steals your own personal calendar, you would then have to rely on somebody else's calendar to navigate your life. And if you begin using a calendar that belongs to another person's family or culture, that substitute calendar would not have your own family's unique dates and anniversaries that preserve in memory your essential family identity. Imagine if you relied on someone else's calendar that didn't have your own wedding anniversary on it. Forgetting your wedding anniversary? Now that could have really serious consequences. But let me explain how having your own calendar stolen from you can have even more serious consequences than that. As a young Jewish person growing up in America, I developed a very secularized and assimilated world perspective. As a result, I never immersed myself into the marvelous historical calendar first revealed to my own people in ancient biblical times. The daily calendar of my own heritage, and thus my day-to-day manner of viewing the world through the God of Israel's intended perspective, had been stolen from me by what I'm alleging to be a spiritual villain. And if I can be completely open with other Jewish people now watching this video, and even many of you viewing this who were not born of a Jewish heritage, I believe you, just as much, have had the God of Israel's unique day-to-day way of looking at things stolen from you as well. But I have good news for you, and by the way, with the God of Israel, there is always good news. I believe I have tracked down one of the villains responsible for stealing our godly perspective. That's right. I think I have identified and apprehended whom I believe was a key perpetrator that helped steal God's intended calendar away from both Jews and Gentiles alike. Having put him in custody, I'm about to show you his mugshot. Maybe you might be able to recognize this perpetrator, or maybe not. Have you seen this criminal before? Do you recognize him? Or rather, do you recognize them? There's two of them. It's true that thieves often work in pairs, and in this case, there's no exception. What you're looking at is an actual ancient coin from the Roman Empire. The picture that you see is of the Roman deity Janus. In ancient Roman times, Janus was worshipped as the god of new beginnings, among other things. One face, the Romans of old believed, was looking toward what was in the past, and the other face, they conjectured, was supposedly looking toward the future. But, honestly, would you pray to and entrust your future to a God that is two-faced? Are you still having trouble recognizing Janus and why he is now being formally charged as a dangerous calendar criminal? Well, let me help you recognize him. Janus was so highly esteemed by the Romans, his image was placed not only on Roman coinage, but many believe a certain month that headed the new year on the ancient Roman calendar was named in his honor. In fact, it's a month that still remains as the first month on our modern Gregorian calendar to this day, the month of January. In his supposed authority as the god of new beginnings, the two-faced Janus, on the 1st of January, his own honorary month, compelled the ancient Romans to reflect back on the year past, while simultaneously, in his two-faced capacity, looking ahead to a new calendar year. Thus it was Janus, as alleged herein, that conspired to steal God's calendar and our entire way of looking at things. Because of what he did, I am alleging Janus is heinous. But one may be asking, isn't it possible to use two different calendars and have two different perspectives in looking at the world? And my consensus is no. You cannot do this without being confused. You cannot look at the world two ways, unless, of course, you have the luxury of two sets of eyes, like somebody I know. It is important to also understand that Janus could not have become a notorious calendar criminal without having an accomplice. Janus, who is a villainous spiritual entity, had no authority on earth to create a new month and usher in a supposed new year all by himself. No, he needed the help of humans in high places of authority, Roman emperors. I hereby allege that they and Janus conspired together to proclaim by imperial ordinance the Roman New Year on January the 1st, an ancient decree which still confuses most people to this very day. Your Honor, I rest my case. So, maybe your calendar has been confused or even stolen, just as mine was. If your calendar was confused, don't feel bad. If you look closely at the face, or rather, the faces of Janus, they look very confused as well. Nevertheless, as a young American assimilated Jew growing up, I have to admit to you, I suffered from even more confusion. I was told, don't worry, don't be confused, you are Jewish. You can follow your own Jewish tradition. You have your own Jewish calendar. You even have your own New Year's Day to celebrate. Haven't you ever heard of Rosh Hashanah? Many of you know Rosh Hashanah literally means in Hebrew the head of the year. The holiday is traditionally celebrated in the fall by the world's Jewish community on the 1st of Tishrei, which our Holy Torah tells us is actually the 7th month on our Jewish calendar, not the 1st month. Even so, in order to accurately keep record of agricultural years in ancient Israel, the rabbis long ago designated the 1st of Tishrei as an agricultural New Year's Day to help differentiate one harvest season from another. It has also been conjectured in Jewish rabbinical tradition that the 1st of Tishrei is the anniversary of the world's creation. Yet despite what the rabbis have instituted or believed about the holiday, our Holy Torah says absolutely nothing about the day known most commonly today as Rosh Hashanah to be emphasized as a New Year's celebration. Rather, the scriptures clearly tell us the beginning of the 7th month, the 1st of Tishrei, is to be set apart by the blowing of the shofar, or the trumpets. The holiday is more accurately referred to by our Jewish people as Yom Teruah, or Day of the Trumpets, and it marks the beginning of the Days of Awe, Judaism's high holy day season. In true Judaism, it is imperative for those who fear Hashem, the God of Israel, to hear the warning sound of the shofar on the Day of the Trumpets and humble our hearts before the arrival of the great ominous day of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, when it is believed judgment is sealed. Although the sacred Day of the Trumpets is an extremely important commanded holiday for all the children of Israel, as I mentioned a moment ago, the holiday should not be designated as a New Year's celebration, as our Torah clearly does not affirm this. So, by now, you may be really confused. You may now be asking, if the Bible does not say that Rosh Hashanah is to be celebrated as the Jewish New Year, what am I to do now? Is there actually a date set in the scriptures to help me get my calendar perspective in order every year? Is there an actual biblical New Year's Day certified in the Holy Torah to help get me back into alignment with the manner of spiritual living that God has commanded for all of his people? The answer is absolutely yes. The Hebrew Bible does tell us exactly when God's calendar actually begins. Believe it or not, the authorized biblical civil calendar was introduced by the God of Israel to Moses immediately before the Exodus from Egypt, when our Jewish people were miraculously set free from slavery. Read with me from Shemot, Exodus chapter 12. Adonai spoke to Moshe and Aharon in the land of Egypt. He said, "You are to begin your calendar with this month. It will be the 1st month of the year for you." So, the 1st month of the authorized biblical calendar God gave to Moses commemorates from year to year the anniversary month of the children of Israel's exodus from Egypt. It is in the Hebrew month of Nisan in which our people receive redemption from slavery in the kingdom of the Pharaoh. On the current Gregorian calendar, the yearly anniversary of the beginning of the months, the 1st day of Nisan, took place at sundown on March 13th this year, 2021. The 1st day of Nisan also marks the anniversary of the beginning of priestly worship and daily intercession for the sins of God's people. Exactly 1 year after the children of Israel began to calculate the months of our calendar, the Lord instituted the operations of the tabernacle in the wilderness and commanded daily sacrifices to begin. The establishment of tabernacle worship, where the holy presence of the Almighty would dwell among our people on a daily basis, should be reminding us of the necessity of allowing God to remove sins from our lives on a daily basis. After all, how can the most holy God continue to dwell in the midst of his holy people if there is constant sin contaminating his community from within? What good is it if we are celebrating being set free from a lifestyle of slavery in Egypt, and yet we are not set free from a lifestyle of sinning? Maybe we haven't considered the animal sacrifices that were commanded daily in conjunction with the consuming fire on the tabernacle's bronze altar point forward to God's ultimate desire to provide a permanent and final atoning sacrifice for the sins of those that belong to him. I'm referring to a perfect covering for sins that only a perfect Mashiach, the Messiah of Israel, would be able to provide. So, if using the right calendar would help remind us year to year of such important things as these, wouldn't it be important, year after year, to be living our lives in accordance with the right calendar? Makes sense to me. Perhaps it now makes sense to you too. And finally, let us consider that generations later, in the very same month of Nisan, which our calendar renews each year, that the final atoning sacrifice God had desired all along came to fruition. It was a sacrificial atonement made for both Jew and Gentile alike. In fact, it was made so that we could all be united together permanently, a perfect covering for all of our sins. Is it any wonder this ultimate sacrifice would historically take place in conjunction with the celebration of our deliverance from slavery in Egypt at the time of our Jewish Passover festival in Jerusalem? God was indeed providing at that time the greatest celebratory victory possible, a permanent victory for God's people over slavery to sin and death. Rav Shaul, or the Apostle Paul, if you will, reliably testified to the congregation at Ephesus in regard to Messiah Yeshua's intercession for a humanity reconciled to the Father in heaven. Here is the revelation as revealed to the Ephesians. For he himself is our shalom. He has made us both one and has broken down the mechitza, which divided us by destroying in his own body the enmity occasioned by the Torah with its commands set forth in the form of ordinances. He did this in order to create in union with himself from the two groups a single new humanity, and thus make shalom, and in order to reconcile to God both in a single body by being executed on a stake as a criminal, and thus in himself killing that enmity. If we are truly called to be partakers of a miraculous new humanity, together, as Rav Shaul has described, let us also be partakers of a truthful reckoning of who we actually are as God's set-apart people, and what perspective the God of Israel requires us to live by. Yes, it's true somebody had stolen my calendar. Perhaps your proper perspective was stolen from you as well. Could it be God has called us at this very time to walk with greater resolve in regard to seeking the truth? Perhaps this should be our New Year's resolution. Being able to finally live in the truth of Yeshua, the Messiah, is very good news. And that is the reason I share good news of the Messiah, Yeshua, to you. Shana Tova. Happy New Year.